All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Larry, and we're going to do Contact Report 60. This one is a pretty long one, so I might have to break it up into a couple of parts. But anyway, this one's all about Atlantis and Mu. Anyway, this was translated by the DeepL translator. Corrections and improvements made by Catherine Mossman, Joseph Darmanin. And the contact person is Semjase. This is Contact Report 60, Thursday, 8 July, 1976 at 14:03 in the afternoon. Billy, we should first of all clear up some things before we concern ourselves with new questions. Namely, it is a case that the human beings of Earth are still unknowing in many things, whereby misunderstandings arise. So this happened, for example, through two questions from me in relation to the American government and the American Pentagon with respect to materials and dead bodies of extraterrestrial origin. In regard to the government, you have confirmed that it has some things of extraterrestrial origin in its possession, whilst you answer this with a no in regard to the Pentagon. Well, it was not clear why for one thing you said yes and another no. Semjase, your question is very illogical. Billy, and you do not seem to understand. Between us, the questions are dealt with logically. However, for the Earth humans, this is not always comprehensible, because they simply do not know certain things. So to them, it is largely also unknown that the American government simply is a national government, whilst the American Pentagon embodies the Ministry of Defense and War. Therefore, concerning this matter, you should give an explanation. They want everything down in writing. Semjase, I understand. America is being governed unofficially by various forms of government. On the one hand, the presidential government governs there. On the other hand, however, also the Pentagon, as well as the military government, and also the CIA, and so forth. Officially, all really belong together. However, in truth, all three forms, in their innermost, work only for themselves alone. So, in a manner of speaking, they make up their own form of government. If, therefore, your questions are related to the official government on the one hand and the Pentagon on the other hand, then accordingly I have to give you also two different answers in relation to this. Namely, that one of these governments is in possession of certain materials and so forth of extraterrestrial origin, whilst it is not known to us that the Pentagon is supposedly in possession of a few dead bodies of extraterrestrial intelligences. The possibility may indeed well exist, however, we have no knowledge about whether it is actually so. In the meantime, we have made an effort to clarify this question, however, we were not able to reach clear results. Billy, I think that this explanation may be sufficient. Now, however, I would just like to sound you out thoroughly in regard to Atlantis and Mu. You have promised me already more than a year ago that you would give me enough information about it. In the meantime, concerning this question, you have probably made a few remarks, but you have not yet given me exhaustive information and explanations. Semjase, certainly. I explained to you at that time that I would inform you when the time is ripe for it. Billy, I know that, but is it not then yet? Semjase, the time has arrived to speak about it. Billy, it pleases me, then go for it. I am all ears. Semjase, as I already explained at an earlier point in time, Atlantis and Mu destroyed one another. However, this was a peculiar case, and I have to begin to recount from a very early time. About 150,000 Earth years ago, after a very long time of wars and uprisings, our home planets finally found peace and freedom. Many millennia after the creation of calmness, peace, and freedom, however, a scientist called Plejaren made himself the leader of a group consisting of about 70,000 human beings, and with their help he appropriated numerous large spaceships and fled. As a great scientist, it was an easy thing for him to force the 70,000 strong group under his control and to bring them to the Earth in a frantic escape through space and time. On board of his stolen spaceships were close to 200 very good scientists of the most varied fields of knowledge. From them, and also from the whole group, Plejaren was unanimously accepted as God, thus as the king of wisdom and leader. During the following millennia, their descendants lived on the earth and built up a high culture. They built many and large cities and inhabited all continents of the earth. Their flourishing lasted close to 10,000 years. During this time, all went well and everything found a very high level of development. However, before the 10,000 years were completed, dissatisfaction erupted again through the lust for might of some that were greedy for might, which led to deadly wars that made the entire earth tremble with wild war cries. That's humans. It's what we do. An earth-world war took place to the extent as has never happened before and has not been brought to earth since. Everything, but really completely everything, that the ones who had come from space had built up was destroyed and annihilated, and only a few thousand human beings of these extraterrestrials survived the tremendous catastrophe. These, however, fled with good and far-reaching spaceships out into space and settled on foreign worlds. Only a very small remnant remained on the destroyed Earth and degenerated completely, whereby they lived completely separately from the small group of Earth-born humans of the time. When, after around 7,000 years, the distant descendants of the ones that fled came back to Earth, they therefore found only extremely wild and degenerated Wesen of their forefathers, who lived, as said before, far away from the Earth humans. The return of the descendants of the former fugitives happened again under the leadership of a god, under whose rule Mu, as well as Greater Atlantis and Lesser Atlantis, were built. At that time, Greater Atlantis and Mu were the two most gigantic cities which had ever been built on the earth, and for the sake of peace, they were built on two different continents. Again, a high culture was built up and everything began to blossom. During a few millennia, complete unity and peace prevailed before some scientists, in their greed for might, Asartetan, in parentheses, got very badly out of control of the good human nature, end parentheses, again, and with all means available to them, tried to seize dominion. The peoples, however, with the distant memory of the wars of their forefathers, rose up against the might-craving scientists, so the scientists had to flee. Through some allies that were well disposed toward them, they were able to appropriate several spaceships and fled into outer space. Calculated in Earth years, this was a little more than 150,000 years ago. During the following tens of thousands of years, these evil-minded refugees lived in a different space and time configuration to our Pleiades, in a neighboring solar system, fathered many descendants, and developed a high technology which offered them tremendous possibilities. This technology, however, they furthered only in hatred and revenge, because they thereby wanted to bring the earth under their gewalt. Through their government, the hatred and pathological craving for revenge of the descendants was constantly stirred up and driven so far that the expectancy of these hate-filled human beings was driven up by means of research, gene manipulation, and through mutations and so forth, so that in the end it amounted to several thousands of years. Each individual human being of this people was taught in the art of war and in the most outrageous intrigues. After 2,000 years, these hateful people had progressed so far that an attack on the earth could be considered. Thus, Thus they got on their way, climbed on board their large spaceships, and came to Earth. This was around 103,000 Earth years ago. Their leader was the Jhwh, Jhwh, Arus, Arus, the barbarian, and scientists of Earth, and stole new land for themselves. Thus they were then able to colonize the north of America. It is the present. I thought by the time you got to that level of evolution that you were good people. There's an awful lot of these kings of wisdom that are barbaric. They are filthy, mean, rotten SOBs demanding sacrifice. Not all evolved people are good. Anyway, back to the thing. Constantly, they push forward to Greater Atlantis and Mu in order to bring the through the intrigues whereby few survivors went into servitude, while great scientists were able to flee with their spaceships and return to the former home of their space-time configuration in the Vega Lyra region. The 7 stars or 7 sisters. Another quick note. Anyway, however, the form in which Greater Atlantis and Mu were destroyed was of such intrigues and full of horror that in the history of the human beings of the earth, it will probably both arose malicious hatred and the will to destroy. Mu, which was in the Gobi Desert, feuded with Greater Atlantis, which was built in the great island kingdom today you call the Azores. At their At their time, the war powers of Mu and Atlantis were of horrendous might and size and equipped with the highest technological achievements. So, Greater Atlantis alone had at its disposal an army of 4 was equipped with small combat beam ships. Furthermore, the government of Atlantis commanded a giant fleet of 123,000 units of single-person destroyers, miniature beam ships for close Earth combat. In addition, there existed another 16,431 Eliminator units, miniature beam ships, which of heat were able to totally eliminate all material within fractions of a second. Finally, they were equipped also with 24,230 overkill beamers, each of which required 10 people to operate and were installed in mid-range beam ships. To this tremendous might, make it less dangerous for the Greater Atlanteans, because the Mu scientists had likewise developed very dangerous weapons, which in many ways were even more dangerous and more destructive than everything of the Atlanteans together. The scientists of Mu had in fact discovered powers which made it possible for them to convert bombs by pulling them out of their orbit of millions of years and with extreme precision steering them onto a carefully determined target of another planet and letting them crash down with devastating force and explode above the target. And it was exactly this frightful weapon they used when Greater Atlantis commenced the full-scale attack against Mu. The best and the most suitable scientists of Mu were charged with finding a suitable planetoid which could be used as a deadly and annihilating missile against Atlantis. Thus they flew their ships out into space and found in the asteroid belt suitable for their purpose. It was a planetoid of several kilometers in diameter, but we are no longer able to analyze its exact size. By means of atomic and electroenergetic energies, it was thrown out of its orbit and brought onto course towards the Earth. After that, the planetoid's own rotation was slowed down and brought to a standstill, whereupon, on the side turned away from the Earth, a drive unit of gigantic size was installed for the purpose of a tremendous acceleration of the small planet, which was supposed to be directed to its destination with breakneck speed. Only less than half a day before the full-scale attack of Atlantis against Mu, the deadly space bomb was completed, a death messenger of human insanity and of tremendous consequences. When Atlantis undertook the attack, the producers of the death missile were informed within a few seconds, by means of hyperwave impulses, about the oncoming events and were charged with allowing the death missile to take off. A few seconds after receiving the command, on the side of the planetoid facing away from the Earth, 1,000 suns appeared to race into the dark space, and with gigantic force, the monster started moving. Very quickly, the speed of the messenger of death increased, steered by scientists controlling the monster, who were sitting on the planetoid, completing their task, and thereby were doomed to die. In the meantime, on the Earth, the Atlanteans eliminated the city of Mu and leveled it. Whoever had not fled into the satellite cities thousands of meters deep underground or into space perished in the totally eliminating rays of the Atlanteans, and nothing bore witness anymore to their former existence. The victorious Atlanteans, however, returned to their gigantic island kingdom and celebrated their victory achieved over Mu in a true delirium of joy. However, their joy did not last long, because they had barely begun their festivities when messages came thick and fast in regard to the danger rushing toward them through space. Only a few high government officials and scientists were still able to clear out and flee with their spaceships into space before the catastrophe was unleashed over Atlantis and made it sink into the sea. Yeah, only the rich people get away. The rest of us were stuck dealing with the consequences of their mismanagement. Anyway, the ones left behind and doomed to die saw the disaster racing toward them, high in the sky and far in the northwest above the sea and the far continent. As if out of nothing, a dark celestial body suddenly appeared, which advanced at frantic speed, with its far side blasting off blinding light. The Colossus came rushing in quite low and in a few seconds turned into a giant. First only visible like a small shooting star, in a few seconds it turned into a gigantic size with a fiery tail. Fascinated and transfixed, dilated pupils from fright, the human beings stared ominously towards the approaching monster, which so completely silently sped towards them, then, however, suddenly gave out an unbearable howling sound as it plunged into and rubbed against the first levels of the atmosphere of the Earth, inducing its resistance. 2 seconds later, the planetoid began to glow like a supernova and created a heat of more than 340,000 degrees. In a split second, vast areas of country burnt to smoldering ash when the enormous heat fell down from the speeding giant. Then the space bomb suddenly exploded at less than 172 kilometers altitude and transformed into many thousands of smaller and larger meteorites, which, like small atomic bombs, were catapulted to Earth and with devastating impact destroyed everything that got in the way. Through the tremendous explosion, the whole Earth was shaken, and the thunder of the explosion rolled around the entire globe. The planet was shaken badly, and many volcanoes erupted out of it. 2 large parts of the exploding planetoid crashed like titanic fists into the Atlantic and pierced through the hard crust of the Earth on the bottom of the ocean. It was as if the world was going under, because the power of impact of the debris was greater than many hydrogen bombs such as you insanely possess today. This was 50 years ago. We got a lot bigger bombs. Deep in the ocean, the Earth's crust was torn apart, and the way opened for the boiling hot and glowing magma of the inner Earth, which now viscously poured out. The seawater began to bubble and boil, vaporizing masses of water, which shot up into the atmosphere up to 35,000 meters high. Through all of this happening, the wild ocean was thrown up into a gigantic tsunami wave, which surged forward with frantic speed and a height of 2,300 meters. Holy crap, 2,300 meters tsunami. Pulled along everything and simply let entire countries sink into the water, or at least destroyed whatever was in its path. The island empire of Atlantis, however, sank within a few minutes in the raging waters of the Atlantic without even leaving one single surviving life form behind. The capital city, which was built like a beam ship, was torn into several pieces and sank with the foundation. This is how the event with Atlantis and Mu unfolded about 9,500 years before today's calendar. So that means it'd be about 11,500 plus another 50, because we're in 2,000 years later. Billy, fantastic, but from where do you have this knowledge? Semjase, it was handed down to us. Billy, phenomenal, but you said just a moment ago that these events belong to the past 9,500 years before our calendar, as you say. Is this date exact? Semjase, certainly, up to 2 years exactly. Calculated back, it is exactly 9,498 years before the start of the current calendar. If you go from the year 2000, then it is exactly 11,498 years. Billy, I cannot believe it. Semjase, you doubt my information? Billy, certainly not, but just look at this. Here, I have received a magazine article from one of our group members. In that, a man named Otto Muck, a German physicist, has calculated that Atlantis must have been destroyed at exactly 1900 hours on the 6th of June of the year 8498 BC. And indeed, precisely as you have just told it, only that he thinks that it was a purely cosmic catastrophe. Semjase, that does not surprise me. Billy, so, and why not? This man has, after all, calculated everything very precisely up to the year exactly, only that he erred by 1,000. Semjase, sure, that is a miscalculation because he relied on information which is incorrect by years. Additionally, he assumes that through the Mu Atlantis events, Noah's flood was triggered, which is not true. Billy, that is known to me. However, I really thought that you would be surprised about the calculation and explanation, which in my opinion is very remarkable. Semjase, why should I? The explanations of this earth-human muck are very well known to us. Also the fact that he, apart from the calculation of the year, is very close to the truth in certain things. But he must indeed know this because only through one of his earlier personalities were the legends about Atlantis recorded in writing for posterity for the first time 2,322 years ago. Billy, you are driving me crazy. You actually think that one of the earlier personalities of this muck was the former Plato? Semjase, I do not think so. We know it very exactly. Here, just draw a comparison with these two pictures. Here is a bust of Plato, and here is the picture of Otto Muck. Does anything stand out for you? Billy, man, girl, that fits. Both of them are almost the same faces. Consequently, Otto Muck must still today show a relation with his former existences. Semjase, certainly. Since then, it has been inherited down through one family lineage. Billy, that is really fantastic. If that man knew it. Semjase, unfortunately, he is not very responsive to such things. Billy, too bad. Semjase, which you are right about. Billy, all right then, but may you now answer a question concerning these minor planets or planetoids. Namely, what is the Adonis group about? Mr. Muck writes that the space projectile was a body of the Adonis group, which I cannot imagine. Semjase, it is very easy to explain. The Adonis group includes all those celestial or space bodies which are called planetoids. Billy, oh, then an Adonis group member simply means planetoid. How complicated people can be. Semjase, that is unfortunately so. Billy, you are also right, but now another question. You once explained to me that there is no life on Mars. If I understood correctly, you meant planetary human life, did you not? Semjase, certainly. Billy, good. So your answer at that time does not exclude that any other life in fauna or floristic form can exist or even exists there. At that time, you said explicitly that all life there did not exist, and logically, you only addressed human planetary life. What do you think now? Will the Americans discover lower life forms with their probe sent to Mars? Semjase, in the coming decades, and especially in the third millennium, you will experience surprises in every respect, both with regard to the atmospheric composition of the planet and also with the fact that Mars has the lowest life and much more water than earthly science has assumed so far, which incidentally will also apply to the Earth's moon. Surprises, however, also lie in the composition of the soil and also, and as already mentioned, in the nature of the micro world. A very small world of flora and microorganisms can be found on Mars if the geoscientific instruments of the probes are good enough to be able to record the corresponding results. Billy, so life on Mars could be confirmed for our science. Semjase, it is within the bounds of possibility that the analysis can confirm this if the scientific equipment is good enough, because microorganic and primitive floral life forms exist on Mars, even if otherwise this planet destroys all other life with its hostile nature. Billy, well then you owe an explanation, at least for our group. As with the American government and the Pentagon, there are two aspects to this. I understand your logic when you say that no life exists on a planet. According to your high logic, such a statement refers only to planetary human life forms, yes? Semjase, sure, there is nothing else to be construed. Billy, that is precisely the point, because when you answer in this manner, one unfortunately always believes that all life is met, that is to say, both fauna and flora, as well as microbial and human life. In future, we must therefore be a little more specific about such matters and so on. Semjase, it is very unfamiliar for me. He's scolding her. Semjase, it is very unfamiliar for me. Billy, then you must make an effort for it, or there will be misunderstandings. Semjase, I understand. I will endeavor to do so. Billy, okay, many thanks for that. But now another question. The next sun system seen from us belongs to the Centauri group. To my knowledge, this is the first Proxima Centauri, then Alpha Centauri and Beta Centauri, which by us, though, is being called something else, namely the Barnard star or similar, which is at a distance of a little bit more than 6 light years away from us. Now, are you informed about whether any humans live in those sun systems who come to Earth? Semjase, certainly. I myself know there, in other space-time structures, several dear friends in all 3 systems, although only in the Barnard system, meaning Beta Centauri, can it be discovered from Earth that small planets are circling around the sun there. But why do you ask? So she's got friends that live in all 3 of these star systems. But why do you ask? Billy, it is a kind of weird story. Do you perhaps know a certain Athar and Kohun? Semjase, these are 2 dear friends of mine from the region of Proxima Centauri. But from where have you got their names? You seem to be informed about certain things from which I, so far up to now, have not given you any knowledge about. Billy, Perhaps, but nevertheless, tell me, since when have these dear Arthar and Kohun been operating on Earth? And do they stay in contact with any humans on the Earth? Semjase, they come here often. They probably maintain contact, but not, however, in a very extensive form. They had the last important contact more than 50 years ago with a man from Germany, who also had permission to portray them very accurately. Billy, well, and at the beginning of this year, they were once more physiognomically, graphically portrayed. Could it possibly be something like these two here? Look, I have a drawing here. Semjase, with question marks. Where have you got these drawings from? That is indeed Kohun and Athar. How did these drawings come into your hands? Billy, that is something you probably wish to know, huh? However, see now here, read this. I have just recently received this by mail. And in parentheses, Semjase reads for a long time before she again turns to me with a really surprised face. And parents. Semjase, that is a really big surprise. And there's pictures of this letter that sent to Billy. And a bunch of stuff on it, a list of addresses and whatever. And the letter says, Honorable ladies and gentlemen, enclosed, we are sending you several copies of a letter of one of our friends who is traveling around the world as a globetrotter at the time. According to his request, we do not want to name any address, the reason for which you will find in the enclosed copies. After a number of consultations with our minister, Pastor Dillman, we have agreed to prepare the enclosed photocopies of the aforementioned letter and forward them to various addresses named to us by Pastor Dillman, whereby we hope that the copies will be useful to you, although we ourselves doubt the statements made in the letter and are seriously concerned about our friend's state of health. Nonetheless, we would like to fulfill the request of our friend, according to the advice of our esteemed Pastor Dillman, and are thus sending you the enclosed, the content of which you must clarify for yourself. We were told that you concern yourself with such things as those mentioned in the letter, so you certainly will know the meaning of all this. Along with the copies of the letter, there is also a copy of a sketch, which our friend enclosed with the letter. We can attest that he makes very good sketches with regard to physiognomies, so that the drafts of both heads must be accurate. The object must correspond with reality if his information corresponds to the facts and does not stem from an attack of fever or the like, which we suspect, but are unable to check because we have not heard from him since the month of February. Perhaps it will be useful to you if we mention all the addresses received by Pastor Dillman, to each of which we are sending a copy of the letter. Perhaps you, among yourselves, may understand more about the peculiar statements of our friend. Hoping to have been of some service to you and to our friend, we send our kind regards. And it's signed P.P.A. Albers. And there's a copy of the letter, and on the future of mankind, www.futuremankind.co.uk/Billy_Meyer/contact_report_060. They have copies of the letter, and they have pictures of the drawings that this guy made. One of them, Athar, and the other one, Kohun. And these were friends of Semjase, drawn by Horst Fenner near Trinidad, Bolivia. And the letter, Trinidad, on 2nd of January, 1976. Dear friends, during my trip around the world, I have now landed in Trinidad. You will find the camp at the river Marmor in the Llanos de Mojos in Bolivia. I have been here for 3 days and have already seen many interesting things. I have already written many typewritten pages full with my impressions and experiences. But yesterday, early in the morning, I had an experience which almost knocked me off my feet. At first, I considered it to be a hallucination. be hallucinations, or a tropical frenzy before I could convince myself that I was fully normal. Maybe you feel the same when you read these lines of mine. However, you know me very well and thus know that I am not a dreamer. Therefore, you simply have to believe me, even though this will surely be difficult for you. Everything is so incredible and crazy that even today I search for faults in my sanity, and I still think I must be dreaming. But nevertheless, everything took place exactly this way as I am now writing it to you, still under the impression from my experiences of yesterday, which for me was simply huge. I cannot express it in any other way. Do not mistake me for being crazy or sick, for I am neither the one nor the other. I am just as normal as you are, and as you know, I am also not attached to fantasies. Let me now tell you my experience from yesterday. It was just 5 o'clock in the morning when I crawled out of the bed and got myself ready for on that day to walk to the more distant surrounding of Trinidad. About 10 minutes after I stood up, I observed something in the morning sky which I simply could not believe. I have indeed already heard of and read about flying saucers, but I have never thought about it nor believed in it. I always looked at such claims as fantasies, but now such a flying saucer flew very quiet and without a sound over Trinidad. It went gradually lower and finally disappeared somewhere behind the bush. I thought I must be dreaming and rubbed my eyes because what I had just seen could simply not be true. The saucer appeared to me, from my standpoint, to have the form of two large half-round discs placed on top of the other, just like a discus looks like. I first sat down and thought about it. Perhaps I would be better off to return to civilization and let myself be thoroughly examined by a doctor. But then I came to the conclusion that I ought to better first investigate the matter before deciding to take such a step. Thus, I took my compass and determined the exact direction where I believed to have seen the flying saucer go down. I then tied my bundle and marched off, continuing in the exact direction I had determined with my compass. It was precisely east. With great effort and sweat, I fought my way further and further through the terrain and rampantly growing bush. It seemed to me as if I would never reach my goal, and I soon wanted to give up and turn back. I had then already been underway for more than 3 hours and had still found nothing. I, therefore, must have suffered a hallucination, because I should have stumbled across the flying saucer long ago, according to my calculation, if it actually had existed. To be sure, I continued to work my way through the hindering bush, breathing heavily and soaking wet from sweat, however, was already yearning with thoughts of turning back. Even so, I did not begin on my way back, because something drove me unstoppably forward. It was as if I just passively was pulled forward as if by a magnet, against which I simply was unable to resist. Then another half hour may have gone by like this. I thought I definitely was going crazy, because through the bush I suddenly saw something very large with a metallic shine. At first I stood there stiff and in disbelief, but I then overcame myself and I struggled the rest of the way through, and again I thought I was dreaming, because in a large clearing hovered a large discus of metal only about 1 meter above the ground, definitely about 14 or 15 meters in diameter. That's about 30 feet across. Wait a minute, 15 meters is actually about 45 feet, 45 to 50 feet, something like that. What was incredible about it was that no noise and no other sound could be heard, and yet this discus hovered above the ground, simply free in the air, as if rooted to the spot. I remained standing only about 20 meters, 66 feet away, and stared over at the flying saucer in disbelief and not understanding. I was no longer able to think any more and could no longer take a step. I am accustomed to quite a lot and quite hard-boiled from all my travels, but what I saw there simply left me frozen. It simply could not and was not allowed to be true because something like that simply could not exist. I do not know how long I actually stood there and did not move. I only know that something suddenly touched my arm, and I then turned around without understanding and as if in a dream. What I saw left me even more frozen because standing beside me were two men in diving suits. I can still remember I was wondering about this, and I asked myself why these two would be walking around in the middle of the bush in diving suits. Only then did it dawn on me, and I noticed many differences. The suits were visibly light and not as cumbersome as many diving suits known to me, nor did the silvery color correspond to the suits known to me. The two blond men also wore no helmets, but had strange-looking devices of different sizes and shapes on their suits. Still rigid, I was unable to speak a word, although the men, who obviously belonged to the flying saucer, did not look vicious and even laughed in a friendly manner. Then suddenly, one of them started speaking something, but I could not understand a word of it. Then the second one also made an attempt, but with the same result. I did not understand a word. Their language also appeared totally strange to me, but with a melodic and sympathetic sound that relaxed me somehow and seemed to release me from my rigidness. Both men were about equal size. Their size were about the same as mine, that is 174 centimeters, which is 5.71 feet. Now took me by the arms and led me towards their flying saucer, which I passively allowed to happen. About 5 meters in front of their saucer, they had erected some strange-looking things, under which also somewhat strange chairs or armchairs stood, in which we sat down in, whereas I, however, was still not able to utter a sound. With a friendly smile, one of the men spoke to me again, but I still could not understand anything. His speech, however, had the effect that the rigidness that had affected me now completely was gone, and I felt very calm. Then I was suddenly able to speak again. Astounded, I inquired in Spanish about this incident that was incomprehensible to me, but now obviously I was not being understood. I then made an attempt in English, but with the same result. The same thing also happened with my native German language. We simply could not communicate. Then one of the men spoke to me again in his melodious and pleasant language, while grasping his belt and switching around on some device hanging on it, which was surely no larger than a pack of cigarettes. While speaking, his language suddenly changed, and just as suddenly I heard Spanish words, then French, and suddenly German. I do not know why, but I was suddenly happily excited about it, something the men must have noticed, because the German language remained, and only now did I notice that the men were speaking to me in my mother language. I can still remember clearly what they first said. We can now communicate through our language transformer. Be greeted and do not fear. We are here in peace and shall depart in peace. Those were the first words that I was able to understand, and I will certainly never forget their exact wording. It was so greatly impressive to me that everything was deeply embedded in my memory, you can sincerely believe me. After we were able to communicate, I was asked whether I was able to retain everything in my memory if they, these two men, were to explain various things to me. I answered this question affirmatively and explained, however, that I would write everything down in shorthand simultaneously if this was allowed, because I was a world traveler who earned my living by writing reports of my experiences. This would actually be very good, I was told, but they wanted to know what shorthand was. I indeed wondered about this question, yet I answered it correctly, for which they thanked me. So I searched out my shorthand pad and a pencil and started to write it down word for word, everything that we talked about between us, so I can give you a true-to-the-word copy of our conversation, which surely will set you in as much astonishment and disbelief as myself. Yet let me tell you all in the order as I have written it down. I am Kohun, said one of the two men. I am called Athar, said the other, introducing himself. My name is Horst Fenner, I explained to both of them. Do you live here in this wild country? Athar asked. No, I am only a tourist here, as I am from Germany. What is a tourist? Athar asked. A visitor, was my answer. Then Athar and I are tourists, said Kohun. How am I to understand that, was my question. Kohun answered, We are not from this world which you call Earth. And how am I supposed to further understand that? I asked, astounded. We come from the stars, answered Kohun, and we are not Wesen of this world. I suppose you want to pull my leg, don't you? I asked. I actually believed that what they said was a joke. No, we come from the star Proxima Centauri, as you call this group of stars, was Kohun's answer. It is the closest solar system to this world, about 50 trillion kilometers, 5.29 light years, away from here, according to your method of calculation. That cannot be. That is, after all, utopian, I opined. And in parentheses, it is easier for me when I simply put the name of each speaker in front of each sentence. I will therefore write it like this, in parentheses. Kohun, we are not joking. Horst, then you must be humans from the stars? Kohun, that is what we are, if you want to call us that. Horst, I cannot believe that. Athar, we are not speaking an untruth. Horst, do you really want me to believe that? Kohun, it is the truth. Horst, that is incredible. What are you doing here then? Kohun, we often come to Earth. We are following the events here and observing the human development. Unfortunately, they are very far behind in their development due to religious, misleading, and political intrigues. The Earth humans could cause great havoc due to their undesirable development and struggle for power, through which also star systems further away could become affected. That is why we come to Earth and observe, in order to be able to prevent the possible worst from happening. Horst, that sounds indeed absolutely incredible. Athar, we are telling you the truth. Horst, if you are really telling me the truth, what could the two of you actually do if something were really to go wrong? Kohun, have no reservations. We are not alone. Apart from us Centaurians, there are several other space races on Earth. Only they come from far more distant systems than we do. Horst, it all sounds so utopian to me, but what do you want to do about the development on Earth? After all, you cannot simply change everything by force. That would surely lead to a world war. And where do the other star people come from? Kohun, but I explained to you that we are telling you the truth. It is therefore not utopian. We also do not want to take any actions against Earth. We have no right to do that, and especially not by Gewalt, which is prohibited for us to use. So you do not need to fear a war from our side. We have many friends on Earth with whom we are in contact and who are working in a peaceful manner for the well-being of humankind, according to our directives. They spread the knowledge about our existence and our mission. You call these fellow humans contact persons. They work on our behalf and are therefore treated with hostility. They are accused of lying and of fraud, against which they unfortunately cannot defend themselves. However, it is also unfortunately the case that amongst these good contactees, elements intermix who only practice fraud and hoax, which jeopardizes the task. In particular, the most important of all contact persons is exposed to the greatest hostility and his life is even threatened. He is a man of highly significant value who became educated as the prophet of the new age. His task, his task is the most important of all, for as a prophet to the human beings of the earth, he must once again bring the authentic teachings of the truth anew. This is the teaching that you call the teaching of the Spirit. These teachings are conveyed to him from the highest of all spirit realms in connection with space races from the Lyra constellation, the stars of the Pleiades, and the Doll universe. Okay, Asket was from the Doll universe. Semjase and them are from the Pleiades. Don't know about the Lyra constellation. I guess we were all originally from the Lyra constellation. But in addition to these, there are a number of other space races residing on Earth or coming here regularly. But the greatest and most important tasks are fully carried out by the space races who come from the Pleiades, because they are the distant descendants of the ancestors of the Earth humans. That is why the great task falls within their realm of authority. These space races have 3 different stations on Earth. And Semjase said that. They got 3 stations and about 141 people. Under the leadership of a commander by the name of Quetzal, whose representative is a female Wesson who is about 350 Earth years old. She is called Semjase and is the daughter of the most powerful commander of the Pleiadian space fleet. She's the daughter of Ptah. The earthly contact person of the Pleiadian race is a man of about 40 years of age who lives in a country you call Switzerland. His name is known to us as Billy. In total, there are 6 different space races stationed on the Earth and on the neighboring stars of Venus and Mars, but where there are very few on very small stations. The number of these residents on Venus and Mars only come to about 50 because these planets are absolutely uninhabitable and are extremely hostile to life. Like all the other planetary bodies of this solar system, in which only Earth is habitable and actually carries life in material and spiritual form, as is known to you. A fact which also ought to be confirmed by your science soon, despite lying claims by hoaxers and fraudsters to the contrary, who pretend to have had, or that they to this day still maintain contact with us. Horst, that is unbelievable. Is that really all true? Athar, we are telling the truth. Horst, I simply cannot believe it. It all sounds like a utopian horror. Kohun, our information nevertheless corresponds to the truth. Horst, I suppose I have to believe it, whether I want to or not. Your flying saucer alone proves to me that you must be right. Athar, we call our flight devices beam ships. Horst, may I know something about its propulsion? Kohun, we are not permitted to give information about such things. Horst, what a shame. Athar, it would be a great help to us if you could offer us your assistance. Horst, gladly. What can I help you with? Athar, we would like to entrust you with a task in connection with our existence. Horst, should I write something about you? Kohun, that would be very useful for our task. Horst, I cannot do that. I am not crazy. No one would buy that story from me, and I would be declared insane. I cannot accept that. Kohun, as you will, then our efforts were in vain. You must leave us now. Horst, wait, I did not mean it like that. Perhaps I could give it a try if I were to remain anonymous. Athar, how are we to understand that? Horst, simply that I do not reveal my name. Kohun, that does not serve the cause. Horst, what should I do then? Kohun, you would have to go public as our contact person. Horst, I cannot do that. I'm not that crazy. Athar, then our discussion is ended. Horst, it is indeed a real pity, but you must understand my situation. Kohun, if this is your final decision, then our conversation has come to an end. Horst, I guess so, but I simply cannot do it. Could you not at least answer another question? Kohun, if it does not relate to our flight devices and equipment, it is all right. Horst, you just spoke of persons who call themselves contact persons, but are not really such, because I have once read several names that I have retained in my memory. One of them was called Adami, or something like that. The other one, Genovesa, and yet another one, Michalek. Could you tell me something about them? Athar, why does that interest you, as you otherwise will only wrap yourself in silence? Horst, it is merely a question. On the other hand, you have convinced me that you must really come from the stars. I would like to learn and further educate myself. I simply cannot go public in order to fulfill your wish. On the one hand, no one would believe a word I say, and on the other hand, I am simply not the suitable person. Kohun, you may well be right. It is also your right to know the truth. The names you mentioned are well known to us, but you mispronounced them. The first is called Adamski. Oh, here we go with Adamski again. The second, Genovese, and the third, Michalek. These are not names of real contact persons, but of malicious swindlers. Neither one nor the other of them has ever had contact with us or any of the other space races. So let me interject something here. These people are from, Centauri Beta? Anyway, they're from like 5 light years away. And they are in contact with the Pleiadians and the Lyrians and all these other ones in their federation. And they're all trying to do the same thing, all trying to get us to wake up. Anyway, to the best of our knowledge, they have also never even sighted one of our beam ships. These 3 are not the only frauds of this kind. There are very many of them. If you hear at a later time such names as Zylar, Menger, Miller, and Nelson or Castillo, Siracusa, then you can be sure that these are definitely the names of frauds. Horst, wow, are there so many then? Athar, there are still many more, but they are quite few as opposed to the real contact persons. Would you not still consider to work for our task? Horst, it is tempting, but I really cannot do it. Perhaps later, I would first of all like to talk in depth about these things to someone who knows of the entire matter and is well informed. Could you give me the name of someone? Kohun, turn directly to the most important man of all. But you cannot take over your task only at a later time because you must make up your mind now. Either you already know what you can take responsibility for and what your duty is, or we have to do without your help. We must be strict in this regard. Horst, then I have to pass because I cannot make a decision now. Too bad. I will consider everything and perhaps at least try to publish this experience with you. Athar, that would be a pleasure for us, and it would definitely also be useful. But you must really go now because we have other work to do. It is too bad that we have guided you here in vain. Go in peace and be not afraid. Dear friends, I was able to write the entire conversation word for word up to this point, and in the end, everything no longer seemed so fantastic. After a few more friendly words, we said goodbye to each other, and I walked for hours back to Trinidad, arriving there shortly before nightfall. I lay awake the entire night and thought about everything. I found that I had acted rather stupid, because I could perhaps have learned much more from Kohun and Athar through a feigned promise. In other words, if he'd have lied to him and said he'll do it, he probably could have learned a lot more stuff. But that's against the laws of creation. Anyway, but I was so confused yesterday through the experience that I did not even think of it. All I thought about was that I might be labeled crazy if I were to actually publicize something. I really do not know what I am supposed to think of all this, or whether I am dreaming. That is why I am writing to you, and eagerly await a response from you soon. Perhaps I did the right thing, or perhaps the wrong thing. Please speak to my father about it, and to the pastor, and ask them for their opinion, and let me know their answers soon. Also, ask the pastor whether the conversation I recorded should really be made public or not. If he thinks that should happen, then please do so. But I would then like to request that neither my address nor your address be mentioned, because I do not wish to be harassed after my return home. If you mention only your address, they would also inevitably stumble across me, which I would definitely like to avoid, which you surely can understand. So if you publicize it, then no extra tours and no hastiness. I am anxiously awaiting a response with your opinion. In about 1 month, I should be in La Paz, where you can reach me at the usual address. Until then, all the best and kind regards to everyone. Your globetrotter friend, Horst. And his letter, there's pictures of the actual letter here on Future of Mankind. And then I'm guessing this is Semjase. I knew nothing about all this. Billy, there, you see, even you are not all-knowing. Semjase, that I have also never claimed. Billy, okay, I am just playing with you. Look, for your consolation, I have got a little solace offering here. You can look at it later, because it has none of my business. It is none of my business. Semjase, then it is not yours? Billy, definitely not. Semjase, pay my dear thanks. Billy, will do, girl. Semjase, now I have a question for you. Have you been able to spend the last few days looking back at the past? Billy, I wanted to do it, but I did not have the time. Twice I could steal away in one afternoon and have a few hours for myself, but I did not get much out of it. The time was too short. Semjase, you have to try, because it is important to all of you. Billy, you mean for the group? Semjase, sure, the time has come for some of you to get to know more about the context. Billy, then you could help me with that. Semjase, sure, but you should handle the issues yourself. In the meantime, you have analyzed more things than you want to explain, I am sure of it. You just do not want to talk about it because you do not yet know the full connections, and they seem too fantastic to you. You just want to keep quiet until you are absolutely sure. Billy, exactly. I cannot take the responsibility for saying anything sooner. Semjase, that is very dutiful. Billy, you start turning the flowers into perfume. But tell me, can you say something about the current context? I mean, what is the task in everything? Semjase, same as the other time. Billy, you mean that they take on certain tasks out of their own discretion and sense of duty? Semjase, sure, you do. You know that very well. Through their self-acquired knowledge and that which they themselves can still attain, they integrate themselves into a duty of responsibility, so that they helpfully stand by you and will be concerned about all those matters which you cannot be responsible for yourself. This also applies to the material concerns of the future, and to your great modesty in the form that the material concerns are dealt with by them, because you cannot keep them in order by your modesty, which was already the case before. Although a very great humility of your person is necessary for the fulfillment of your and our mission, you are simply too humble, which can jeopardize you in your task if you do not help yourself in this regard and are not given loving help. In many cases, you cannot be concerned about your own well-being precisely because of your modesty, so you have to be mothered in this area. In self-awareness, our dear female and male friends have partially recognized this, whereby the female friends in particular have turned to the urgently needed task of doing or handling the most pressing things for you. But they do it out of honest love and joy, and with the certainty of their knowledge that this is necessary because you yourself cannot be master of these things. But they also fulfill their task and duty because the knowledge of truth has awakened in them, and they have found the path to wisdom, which is why they also give their help in thanksgiving. They know well that only through communal help can you fulfill your difficult mission, and since they have recognized it in truth as truth and of the utmost importance, they have become dutiful. Thus, they are helpful out of their own free will. Billy, and have you not helped a little? Semjase, you cannot expect such things of me. Certainly, I have received many thoughts from our friends, whom I also call my personal friends, because they have become very dear to me. But I have not influenced them to do anything, because this would not have served the cause. Only I helped them by telling them the truth in the finest thought form, if they were able to grasp it. So everything lies in their own grasping and recognizing, and also in their own decision. Billy, sorry, I did not mean it like that. Semjase, then I misunderstood you. Billy, it is okay. Can you at least tell me if I am right when I assume that certain connections from the distant past will bind us together again now? Semjase, you know very well that it is. You know a lot of things and matters more than you want to admit to us. You even know it for sure, but you still lack evidence for it, which you simply have to work out for yourself. Billy, I know I am just a damn barbarian realist. Semjase, sure, but that is a good thing, because you can always create clear cognition and not err. Billy, it is possible, but it is right often cursedly difficult. Semjase, I do not know any possibility of dissuading you from a goal once it has been set. So you will crown this time's success. So you will crown this time's search with success, even without my help. I know exactly that. Billy, all right, maybe you are right. But then how am I supposed to tell my dear friends everything? I cannot make a fuss about it. It is just not in me. They're talking about Billy just finally figuring out that he is the reincarnated spirit of Emmanuel, plus many others, but basically from Emmanuel. And he doesn't want to say anything because he hasn't sorted it out yet, and Semjase's not going to tell him directly. So we're kind of beating around the bush about the same thing. Anyway, Semjase, I am aware of this, so I could help you by taking over this task for you and explaining everything in a contact report, which should only be dealt with within the group. Billy, it will take a whole truckload of boulders off my back. Thank you so much. Semjase, it is my pleasure. Billy, golly, girl, that really got me heated up. Semjase, it is understandable to me, but keep in mind that the group members in the closest circle have become very knowledgeable and understand many things more than those who belong to you only in loose form. Give them my dearest thanks and greetings. Billy, gladly. Semjase, then we should say goodbye again for today. Billy, whatever you say. Could you allow me one last question, though? Semjase, certainly. Billy, thank you. But in the past you had told me that you would answer the question regarding Atlantis and Mu only when the time is ripe for it. However, today you have given me the answer, and I cannot detect that the time is ripe for it. How can I recognize it? Semjase, that is very simple. For many years now, we have been keeping an eye on Otto Muck, who has been inspired by us for certain things. They're sticking thoughts in his head. Read that again. For many years now, we have been keeping an eye on Otto Muck, who also has been inspired by us for certain things. First, he was supposed to go public informatively on a large scale with the results of his research in order to prepare the human beings of the earth for the full truth about the events surrounding Atlantis and Mu at that time. This he has done, on one hand through a book, and on the other hand also through the newspaper article that you have shown me. Thereby, the ground is prepared to reveal the complete truth. Today, I wanted to tell you about the events surrounding Atlantis and Mu anyway, but you beat me to it with your question. Billy, I see. Then I jumped the gun somewhat. Semjase, that is not so, but for now, farewell and goodbye. Take care of yourself. Billy, the same for you, and also greetings to Playa and Quetzal. Goodbye. So that's the end of Contact Report 60. It's a little long, about an hour and 13 minutes, but they talk mostly about Atlantis and Mu and what happened to them, and if we're ever going to find them. that's a definite no. And they also talk about this. It was a letter that Billy received from this guy, Horst, who had met two of Semjase's friends from different star systems. And there's more backing up between the Plejaren and the ones from Lyra and the Alpha Centauri people and the Beta Centauri and all these other ones. That there is definitely a community of spacefaring people out there, or a federation as she has called it. It's kind of funny, Gene Roddenberry also called it that. But anyway, I'm starting to see 2 and 2 are getting put together, and I'm coming up with 5. So anyway, that was Contact Report 60, and we'll get on with 61 next chance I get. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.